Bhavana Bartholf joins the podcast today. Bhavana is a global chief digital and transformation officer for the Microsoft Commercial Business Unit and is part of the worldwide commercial business. Bhavana is responsible for building and landing the transformation strategy that accelerates the evolution and shift of Microsoft solution sales, bringing together industry aligned, solution aligned, and partner strategy for Microsoft. In addition to that, she's an exceptional people leader, culture impactor, and global business executive. She has been recognized as one of the top 100 women in tech at Tech Inclusion. Recognized also as a transformational leader, innovative technologist, STEM advocate, and an ally for women and racial ethnical minorities, REM. She also has a strong proven track record of growing female REM workforce while promoting diversity and inclusion. Over the years across many different businesses has driven a shift, approximately a 50% increase in attracting and recruiting strong diverse talent. She has been dedicated to fostering positive, transparent, and a collaborative work environment. She served for 6 years on the board of the Gift of Adoption, a nonprofit that provides adoption assistance through grants. She also continues to support her passion for women in technology. I've personally invited Bhavna to the session to talk to me about her leadership journey, her lessons learned along the way, and some of the key factors that drives her to contribute to human society and lead by example. Bhavna, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Welcome and really excited to be here, Rashan. So thank you for including me.
So leadership podcast, in addition to everything I talked about in your background, I'm always super curious with the overall impact and the overall journey that my guests have been on. And of course, looking at your profile, doing the research that I've done, I've gotten visibility into how it all started a little bit, but I'd like you to double click on that and maybe share a little bit with me on that in terms of the very first job. Like I know you started at Microsoft straight out of university, it seems, right? But maybe talk to me about the first job and how that all started and some of the highlights and lessons and principles that you've learned, which served you later on as you've grown into a leadership role.
Thanks. Yeah, so going back, that's 20 years, but that's a long time ago. But if memory serves me right, so I came to the U.S. To do my graduate degree in manufacturing engineering, and then Microsoft recruited me right out of college to come in. And initially, I will say I was a little surprised with my background and lack there of background in computer science that a company like Microsoft would be interested. And even back then, the reason for considering me and bringing me into the company was based on potential and passion. And so I will say that was a huge motivator, especially for someone starting their first job early in career, to have someone else recognize their skills, because it's early in your career, you struggle a little bit about believing in your strengths and capabilities, and knowing that someone else can see it as well, I think was a huge piece of why I love this company and why I joined. In my very first job, I was a support engineer in our technical support organization, and I went through our onboarding. Back then it was called Service Academy, so I'm dating myself as I kind of go through that. But as a part of that process, most of the people in the program were of computer science background and origin, and so starting in the role was a little intimidating, kind of going through learning a technology, figuring out how you'd kind of go in. And on the first day after we finished onboarding and I kind of went into the main office, somebody just said, "Hey, I know you haven't onboarded yet, but we need you to talk to this customer." This was back when we still did consumer support. And they said, it's really a 5-minute conversation, but it'll take you 45 minutes. And so, let's have you just kind of go out. We're here to support you as you go through it. So I was like, all right, there's no better way to jump in than just jumping right in with both feet. Well, long story short, the person on the other end, I think finally having the attention of someone, being patient and working through with them, actually would not get off the phone and was attempting or threatening suicide. And so my short call lasted 8 hours with people recording it. And it was kind of one of those lessons learned for the future kind of scenarios. But what that taught me on that first day of the job is, one, every day was going to be better than that. I think two, I didn't need to have all the skills in the world. A lot of it was really about people connection and building a sense of trust early on, and knowing that would take me farther enough than I thought it would. And just working off of those foundational skills, I think, helped me on in that earlier job. And I'd say since then, it's been a great ride.
So pretty interesting background there, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. Coming from a manufacturing, I guess, educational background, I would say, and then obviously jumping into a support role, and then 20 years down the line, transitioning into some really incredibly senior roles, responsible for large organizations, leaders, people, businesses as well, and obviously for strategy, right? Just making an impact globally for Microsoft and its overall strategy on how we go to market. Do you feel, considering those backgrounds and considering those early days that you talked about there, and one of the things you highlighted on the people communication, do you feel like you've done anything or had to do anything specific for you to stand out, to be set aside or set apart, for you to be recognized for some of those senior roles?
So I'll say, I would say I do owe a lot of my success and ability to have achieved some of the things I have based on the people I was surrounded by. So I will say people play a huge role in that component or equation of success. I think the piece that you're asking me specifically is, what did I do differently compared to others? I'll say, if you kind of look at my career journey, so I talked about my very first job and just and day one in the job and that experience. But what that taught me was I love working in a space that's not well defined, and I'm okay taking on risk. And early on, taking the account that nobody else wanted because people don't seem to see, the opportunity or growth in the account, or taking on a line of business or a role that's not well defined. And what I learned over time was that was a huge driver and motivator for me, but that also, lend me kind of the stepping stones where I got a lot more doors open to trying new things, because a lot of times going into a space that's not well defined, doesn't have a lot of the resources that usually exist in something that's more mainstream and larger in scope, I think is a little daunting for folks when it comes to your overall performance and how you will get compensated at the end of it. I kind of look at that as a challenge kind of going in, and I love anything that if someone tells you can't do something, that's kind of one of my bigger motivators on, well, let me see what I could do to, change that statement around. And so I think that works in my favor, but I think that also led, to a lot of opportunities, because some of them came through reorganizations, and I realized through every reorg, I was put into a brand new organization, new leadership team, completely different line of business. And so it created a lot of very diverse experiences for me where, sometimes I've gone into organizations where I feel like I absolutely have no clue what the heck the job is, but I trust in the people and I'll figure my way out. And so I think that is super helpful. At least that's what's worked for me.
I've read some of the early leadership lessons that you talked about, right? And I think you kind of displayed something there that's really significant, just in terms of taking on challenges, getting outside the comfort zone, and really embracing the diverse set of skills that allows you to grow as an individual and also grows as a leader. And I've read some of these leadership lessons that you talked about, or principles, should I say, that you talked about, that you've actually taken from your grandfather. Tell me a little bit about them. Tell me what they are, and then tell me, how do you apply that consistently in your growth?
Sure. So I just for context, based on Rashan, as you kind of just said that, right? So I grew up in India with my grandparents because my parents lived in different countries around the world, so it was kind of an easier, home base for me. My grandfather, was a self-made man, didn't come from a lot, and so his biggest piece in his experience and his journey had been about really setting a stage for yourself on things that you believe can happen, dreaming big and really imagining things that are possible even though it doesn't seem impossible today, which kind of caters to what I had to. So if someone says I can't do something, then I'm just going to figure out how to change that statement. And a lot of that foundationally came from growing up in India. Women, there's certain lines that women worked in, and you were successful. Manufacturing, as I kind of called out, wasn't a very female dominated industry. And so I truly think I just picked it just for the sake of proving myself, on I can do what everybody else thinks, we can't do. But, I ended up in software. But the biggest things that I learned, kind of from him was, a couple of, critical components, right? One of it is starting with, you've got to start by believing in yourself, because if it doesn't start there and you can't, see you can't be what you can't see. Like I love that that quote. I think I heard it from Michelle Obama, but it really speaks to very specifically just that notion of it starts with you, and you've really got to be, comfortable and confident in being able um, in kind of seeing your capability and your strength. And also knowing that you're worth it right through that process. The second one is, you always have a choice. And that was something he instilled really early on, right? Like, which is just because a door is closed on you or someone says you can't, you still have a choice. Is that what you want to believe in? Or can you create another path for you to kind of make that happen? And I feel like in our careers, there are points in time when we feel stuck, or we feel like we have to do this because maybe I'm not enjoying the role, but my family depends on me. But there's always so many things and conversations you can have in your head. But the thing is, at the end of the day, you always have a choice. Make that choice sooner than later, and then you'll be surprised on the shifts in choice and the happiness you'll kind of get from it. The third one is your experience is your journey. And, he just says, like, if you keep comparing your life to others or looking at how somebody else achieved their success, or, doors that were open for others and no one's opening a door for you, it doesn't matter, right? His whole thing was those experiences are what makes you stronger. It's what creates perseverance, and it actually enables you becoming the person you are. And so don't shortchange that. Don't, stop comparing and just focus on enjoying the experience. The fourth one was, his whole thing was like, live every day like it's your last. And it was more on that concept of make big and bold choices. And, then the possibilities will be endless. And then more importantly, there's no regrets. Like you really will operate from a place of, I made the choice that I really wanted to make today, or I did something that I thought was unique and interesting. And you don't take too long overanalyzing things, because you live in the moment. And I will say that's one of the toughest things as I kind of go through, have gone through life over the years. As you get older, you start becoming a little bit more logical and rational, and it's kind of tough to do that. But I've just realized, most recently, that I've got to really bring that back into the forefront. And the last one is just be kind. He always said smile more, which I think is important. You never know who else, needed that more. But I think as I've evolved in my career and as I've gotten older, I've also realized sometimes the toughest person to be kind to is not somebody else, it's actually yourself. Like giving yourself that grace and that space to really be okay in celebrating the small wins, even though you may not have accomplished, what you really wanted to get to, but you've got to celebrate along the way and make that time and be okay in where you're at, and focusing on you is a good thing. So I think I'd say that's the last lesson.
That's amazing, and massive kudos to your grandfather there for some of those lessons, right? Just listening to that, I can see the passion that you described that with. I can see the appreciation that you have as well, just for learning some of these lessons, and obviously having someone like that in your life as well, right? Just in terms of believing in yourself, always. I feel like one of the things you mentioned there when you said always have a choice is I feel like our lives are built around multiple choices that we make that ultimately put us in the position that we're in, and then also the experience as well, right? Just not just leveraging experiences as the journey, but building on and creating experiences as well to contribute to the overall journey. And I love the live every day like it's your best, right? That's amazing. And then be kind as well, right? That's really important in terms of individual growth, individual, I guess by definition, success to a point as well, right? Loaded question, infamous loaded question, but I have to ask it anyway, because those are a lot of individual contributors to a successful life. What does leadership mean to you?
So leadership for me means I've opened the door for others. I've left things better than the way they were, and I've empowered and inspired others to be able to do more.
Right.
And I would say that's how I would net it in a nutshell from an outcome perspective.
Perfectly well placed, right? And I know that also, just talking about your background earlier on there, I'm familiar with you doing a lot of mentoring, a lot of leading, coaching. You also write on several vital topics around women in tech, around diversity, around inclusion, just overall leadership. Maybe talk to me a little bit about, where does that desire and that passion come from to focus on some of those important topics, but also be impactful and effective with them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's still a journey. I have a lot of passion for it. I will agree on that piece, right? I think having been a part of our professional services organization, there have been many a times where I've gone into, new businesses where we have very, very small female representation. And when I say small, it's like less than 1% in some scenarios, right? And here we are at Microsoft, and I know this is many years ago, and I think we're being intentional, but I think what are we doing to open up the doors, right, for others? So if I've just gotten there, why is it we're still struggling to find female talent? My belief is someone supported me and enabled me to get there. So what could I do to give back? A huge part of my, kind of growing up is, anything you do, let's give it back to the community and kind of play your part and your role in making a difference there. So I'd say earlier on for me, it was all about representation, and representation matters, which is I need to see leaders on the top as I kind of grow in my career, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the same for others. And so how am I, what is the role that I can play? And it's every person can make a difference, and it starts by trying, right? It's kind of my notion, at least, that I believe in. And so, have I done everything I possibly can to make a difference and change? And so that's how the original conversation started, around women in technology, women in business, and even, increasing racial, ethnic, minority representation, at least in the US subsidiary. And so it started by, we have such amazing talent out there. How do we encourage more people to get into lines of engineering? And then more importantly, how do we make jobs more attractive to bring in more female talent? And then there's also, women deal with a lot of things a little differently. Just as a simple example, if a female sees a job description and they only meet, let's just say 50% of the JD, or for that matter, even 80%, they're not going to apply for the job. Whereas it's different, the other way around. And so those little things matter, which is there are people extremely qualified. If we took the time to put the right systems in place to enable that shift, then we can make a difference. And I will say, over the years, I think, and I'm proud to be a part of Microsoft as a company where we are number one, recognized for diversity and inclusion. And I love the effort and work and investment that's gone in there, but we still have work to do, if I had to be really honest, right? Like, I think the pieces that we've done is we've done a really good about representation, recruiting diverse talent, but what are we doing to actually continue to equip and enable that talent to kind of grow, into leadership roles? Do they have the support system and network to feel like they're going to feel supported? They have a space in which they can actually talk about challenges that they're facing, because even to this day, it happens, more times than we think. And so I love the work that's being done around allyship, but there's more that we can continue to do so that this is more ingrained in our DNA. The other piece that I'd also say is, as you grow as female leaders, like, outside of Microsoft as well, like, do we have representation in leadership positions? Do you see more women on board positions across company boards? And it was just a fascinating journey for me to even go through that process on, as you grow as leaders in an organization and you've paved the way and you've kind of built the network and the connection, are you all working together to drive systemic change? And systemic change takes time. And so, like I said, everything starts with, setting the stage and starting and trying in small numbers. And then as you build that network, as you lay every stone down, you start creating a broader path. And I think we have a journey we have a long way to go on that journey, but we're making progress, and I'll do everything I can to support it in any way I can.
So first things first, thank you so much for being so passionate and being so impactful and intentional with some of those very crucial, vital topics, right? I can see the type of leader that you are just in terms of your description of what leadership is, but then also the focus on the important topics and driving a culture, a theme, and an environment where we're intentional about all these types of topics, and more importantly, representation specifically. How do you because leading a group of leaders is one thing, leading a large global organization is one thing, but how do you encourage the leaders that you represent to add value and be consistent with focusing on some of these things as well as leaders in your organization?
Sure. So over the years, I've had organizations of different
Right.
sizes. I'd say so one of the things I do, and this, whether you're a leader or what we'd categorize a manager or an individual contributor, doesn't matter, right? To me, it's important about connecting with people and what I would say activating their inner passion, or however we want to categorize it, right?
Right.
So every organization I have joined over the years, regardless of the size, I always take the time to do an initial connection with every single person, whether you're my direct report or somewhere down in the organization, it doesn't matter. But the importance of that for me is, one, to get to know the person on the other side of the table, not as who they are at Microsoft, what their job and title is, or anything like that, to get to know the person at their core level. The second thing is I want them to also understand that we're all human and we all have, we all come from, similar backgrounds and we all started somewhere, right? And so I need to make sure that people actually trust in me and that they, one of the most important things for me as I build teams out is, and I have like 4 things, but one of them, which is very important for me, is I need people around me that are fully comfortable in calling me out when, I can roll out a strategy and I really appreciate the person that can call me out on the BS and that strategy is never going to land or work. Like that's the person I need to hear from. I'm all about, getting to the truth of an issue and
The
really,
respectful challenge. Yeah.
yes, and respectfully challenge. And more importantly, having that, having someone that feels like they are comfortable enough to tell me that, right? And so
Right.
you want to create that environment. So I think that for me, for, above everything else, is super important that I create that environment where folks, anybody feels comfortable that they can pick up the phone and just tell me that. The second thing for me from a leadership perspective is really understanding what drives a person, what motivates them, and more importantly, where is their true passion. And then as you build out whatever the person's job and accountability is, I always tell folks, if you're going to put the effort in, let's work smart. And what I mean by working smart is build your strategy or build your workload out in such a way where it's kind of like that you're creating more of a domino effect or a ripple effect, right? Which is that work of just dropping that one stone into water creates the larger waves, and it actually makes a much broader impact than it really is. And I spend a lot of time on that foundational piece. I know sometimes people are a little bit impatient and they're like, we need to just move, we have to build our strategy, we've got to keep going. And I'm all about pausing, taking time to get to that place of clarity and laying the right foundation so everyone knows how things work together. And the fact that once we're all aligned, then I'm all about empowering leaders to go do what they need to do, and you really pull me in when you need to, which I think works really well, because the biggest thing I'll say is every time I've left an organization, I've kind of worked myself out of a job anyway, because that the leaders are empowered, the business runs really well, and people continue to accelerate on the momentum that we've created. And I think that's foundationally how I've operated and how I lead organizations and drive the expectation.
What has been one of the biggest failures that you've had as a leader?
I've had so many of them. So let's see. So I'd say as a leader, I will say sometimes well, I'd say the one that I would say that I hold myself highly accountable for is when my gut and my instinct is saying that I need to do something, move faster, make a really big change and decision. And sometimes I'm always worried about the immediate person and the work associated to. So something can be as simple as, hey, the person that reports to you isn't as effective, they're not in the right role and right fit, but I'm all about giving a person a chance. But sometimes trying to work with that one person, but if the impact of that person is large because they support a large group of people, and taking your time, even though your instinct and your gut and everything is telling you like you've got to move faster because the impact on other people is larger. If I kind of go back in leadership timing, I'd say that's one thing that I always, I believe leaders just need to do differently, is sometimes having tough conversations is not easy, but the impact and implications of not having that tough conversation sooner, you know, the impact that it causes is actually pretty large. And so I've learned that early on, and now I've gotten better. But I would say, as a leadership lesson from a failure perspective, just knowing how it impacts other people, I think that would be one I'd call out.
Yeah, that's really important, right? Because you talked a lot about getting people to be comfortable and getting people to respectfully challenge you, but you also talked a little bit about, I love, by the way, your direct line of communication with pretty much everyone in the organization to build and understand what drives them and what motivates them as well, right? Because then it really transitions into you creating an environment not for them to just challenge you, but be able to have those open, those tough conversations, right? And be able to give constructive and supportable feedback, I guess, right? As we end our conversation, there's one important question that I'd love to ask you, because you shared a lot about your journey. You shared a lot about what you've taken from your grandfather and then how you've been making an impact on some of these vital topics, and also the long way that you believe you have to go as well. So when it's all said and done, at the end of the leadership journey, much, 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 much longer from now, what do you want to be remembered for as a leader?
I want to be remembered for being the leader that made a person feel great about who they were, and that they could reach for the stars and be able to do anything they imagined.
That is amazing. What a place to leave it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to be here and connect with me. Thank you.
No, happy to be here. Thanks again, Rashan, and appreciate the work that you're doing as well around leadership conversations.
Thank you very much.